said, "You were never a real mother to me, so I stopped being one, legally," and the inheritance followed. The auditorium was filled with the hum of excitement, proud parents shifting in their seats, flashes from cameras catching every moment as graduates filed across the stage. I sat in the front row, clutching a small bouquet of wildflowers tied with ribbon, my palms damp despite the cool Montana morning. I had worn my old blue dress, the one Damon once told me looked like it belonged to a school teacher from another century, but it was the only dress that made me feel steady, rooted. My heart pounded as Damon stepped up to the podium, tall and handsome in his cap and gown, the tassels swinging as he adjusted the microphone. For a moment, I thought I would burst with pride. Then he opened his mouth, and every word that followed cut me like glass. "You never hugged me at graduation," Damon said, his voice firm, carrying through the auditorium. "I walked off stage, clutching diplomas, but you were never proud. To me, you were never a real mother. I remember years earlier, at his middle school graduation, I tried to stand and hug him as he stepped off the stage, but his stepmother gently guided me back to my seat, saying, 'Not now, Mom. Don't embarrass me.' That moment seared into me, my arms open, his back turned. Margot showed me precedents in Montana law, cases where conditional inheritance, tied to public acknowledgement, had held up in court when properly notarized and witnessed. She walked me through those judgments, those articles, those statutes, reminding me this path was not fantasy but legal history. The room froze. Murmurs rippled. My throat closed, tears burning my eyes. I rose slightly in my seat, almost reaching out to him, but then his eyes met mine, sharp, cold, a warning glare that pushed me back into silence. My knees trembled as I sat again, flowers wilting in my hands. Damon's voice grew louder, filled with accusation. "All those years you say you supported me, but you never gave me what I wanted. You were always second-rate, always embarrassing." He turned his head slightly toward the audience, as if to ensure they saw his disdain. "She spent my college money on strangers. She always cared more about charity than her own son." The audience gasped. Some turned to stare at me, others whispered behind their hands. I could hear the sharp inhale of a woman beside me, the rustle of a man adjusting in his seat. My cheeks burned as if the spotlight had shifted from Damon to me. My body trembled, but a fierce resolve steadied me. If you feel justice deserves celebration, smash that hype button. Let us keep stories like this alive, echoing far, far away. Your support helps us bring understanding and love to those who deserve it. Thank you so much. Keep listening. A young man in the crowd, one of Damon's classmates, glanced down at me with wide eyes, as though searching for the truth. His expression said he was not sure whether to pity me or believe Damon's words. My lips trembled, but I forced them shut. I could not defend myself here, not with shouts, not in this storm of pride and shame. I knew I had already taken my steps months ago, quietly, deliberately. I had walked into the office of Margot Ellery, my lawyer, weeks before this day. I had carried with me the decision no mother ever wishes to make. With her help, I drafted a new will, a legally binding declaration that made one truth undeniable. If Damon did not acknowledge me as his mother in public, before the world, if he did not speak the words he so bitterly withheld, then every dollar, every acre, every account, every stone of my home would bypass him entirely and flow instead into the foundation I had established. Before the ceremony, months before he ever stepped on that stage, I had already spoken to Margot about the legal path ahead. She carefully researched Montana's estate laws, particularly cases involving conditional inheritance. There was precedent, she assured me, cases where beneficiaries were required to fulfill specific terms, including public acknowledgments, before receiving their share. The law was on my side, if the documentation was airtight. We finalized everything in her Helena office. The amended will, with its conditions spelled out in plain terms, was signed, notarized, and sealed. One copy sat safely in Margot's deposit box. Another was archived in a secure vault under her firm's guardianship. I carried only a summary letter that confirmed the terms, just in case the day ever came when truth would need defending. The Marjorie Hale Mothers Foundation. My legacy, my refuge, my final act of defiance against erasure. I had it notarized, sealed, and secured. It was not anger that guided me, but clarity. If Damon could stand before a crowd and declare I was never his real mother, then I would not be one, at least not legally, not on paper. He could strip me of the title in public. I could strip him of the inheritance in law. As Damon's words echoed through the hall, I reached into my small leather purse. Inside was a summary letter from Margot, proof of the conditions we had set long ago. The full documents were far from here, guarded, secured, untouched by theatrics. But the truth they carried? It lived in my bones. I touched its edges as the audience shifted uncomfortably, some frowning at Damon's cruelty, others glancing at me as if wondering why I sat there and endured. He was still speaking. She gave my money away. She called it kindness. I called it betrayal. She chose strangers over her own blood. His voice trembled not with sorrow, but with self-righteousness, a performance for the crowd. I closed my eyes, drew a breath. The flowers in my lap trembled. I felt the weight of years, of sacrifices Damon had never seen, and yet for the first time I felt no desperation to prove myself. I had already laid the path of truth in ink, in law, in permanence. The boy who now claimed I was never his mother would soon learn the cost of those words. The applause at the end of his speech was hesitant, fractured. Some clapped out of politeness, others sat stiff and silent. I stayed in my seat, back straight, eyes forward. I did not rise, I did not flee. I let his words hang in the air, knowing that their echo would not last forever. But my will, my choice, my foundation would outlive every cruel syllable he had spoken. I held the envelope in my purse like a talisman. Damon thought this was his moment of triumph, the stage of his weapon. He did not yet know that the stage was temporary, but signatures, seals, and law were eternal. And soon, when the truth unfolded, the son who declared me never a real mother would discover that I too could stop being one, legally, completely, and irrevocably. I remember the early mornings in that woolen factory, the hum of looms and the smell of raw sheep's fleece in the air, when I was still young and strong, my fingers blistered from knitting sleeves, weaving jumpers. But every dollar I earned went into Damon's schoolbooks, into small jars of jam, into dinners with beans and bread, all so he could have what I never did. I left the fields at dawn, came home dusty, earth still under my nails, just to see Damon sleep in peace. When Damon was 10, he watched his friends bring steak and potatoes for supper, while on our small kitchen table it was beans and soft bread smeared with butter. I heard him whisper to a boy, "You made me eat beans, other kids had steak." I swallowed my pride, kissed his forehead, told him tomorrow might be different. I baked caramel apple pies every fall, using apples from the little tree Damon planted himself when he was 6. I caramelized sugar, spread buttery crust, smelled cinnamon in every slice. Once, Damon tasted a piece and wrinkled his nose. "Mother, nobody likes caramel and apple. It smells like trailer park," he said, loud enough the neighbors could hear. I just nodded, forced a smile, and kept baking, because I believed joy could be simple. Years later, I hung a photo of him as a small boy, cheeks rosy, coat mismatched, walking to school. I strung it on nails in my hallway, framed it simply. When guests came, Damon would frown. Once he said sharply, "Stop with your wallpaper emotions," and he yanked down the picture. It fell, glass cracked. My heart broke more at the insult than the broken glass. When he caught pneumonia, I carried him through a snowstorm to the emergency room in town. His cough-rattled lungs. I held him under my shawl, whispering prayers. But when he grew older, he said, "You embarrassed me in front of ER nurses. I hated your tears." It was never about me doing wrong work. It was about him wanting prestige, wanting to erase the smell of the fields, the taste of bread crust, the memory of cold nights in our old house. He wanted designer labels, labels that I never could give, and those very same labels he said I destroyed by my presence. While he was growing up, I saved pennies. I worked extra shifts. I baked pies for fairs. I knitted blankets for neighbors just to sell them cheap and keep every cent. I bought stock quietly, invested in that small foundation I dreamed of, a place that helps kids who feel like outsiders, who know too well what it is to be looked down upon. Damon never knew how I did it. He thought it was luck or charity. I did not tell him that the money he believed I spent on strangers was laying quietly in bank accounts, accruing interest. I did not tell him that the kitchen, the old blankets, the simple meals, they were my declarations of love. I thought one day he would understand that being a mother meant showing up, even when the world doesn't clap. But the unspoken truth was that he never saw me as worthy of being seen. Every time I asked him if he was proud, he would change the subject. Every time I offered comfort, he demanded elegance. I was always behind the scenes, in worn shoes, patched coats, voice soft. And that voice was not enough. Now I sit here, months before this graduation, having had that foundation ready, having written that will. The money I saved, the photographs I hid, the bank statements with small deposits, all documented. I made a promise to myself. If Damon stood here and declared I was not his mother, then legally I would accept the consequences. I prepared for a future where his words would echo in this hall, but paper, law, proof. My foundation would outlive the cruelty, because even if you try to erase a mother with your words, there are signatures that cannot be bruised. There are investments you cannot debunk, and there are hearts who carry your kindness, even when your child cannot see it. I met with Margot Ellery in her law office on a rainy morning, thin light filtering through blinds, the smell of damp leather in the air. I asked her to help me change my will, to prepare for the legal possibility that Damon might deny me publicly, that perhaps I would have to cease to be his legal mother if he insists I was never one in his heart. Margot looked at me sharply. "Are you truly ready to let go of him, Marjorie?" she asked, voice gentle but firm. I swallowed and said, "I am not letting go of him, I am only stopping the reaching." Margot nodded. She slid across the desk a folder labeled Probate and Guardianship/Parental Rights. She explained how, in Montana law, there is a way to establish a codicil or amendment to set conditions in a will that depend on the beneficiary's behavior. If Damon does not publicly acknowledge me, he loses inheritance. She asked if I had proof to back up my claims. I said I had saved letters, receipts, voicemails, photos, everything I ever thought I would never need in court, but now I must train them into armor. I brought home a small box. Inside was a yellowed letter Damon had written when he was 8. "Mom, thanks for staying up with me." It was crumpled, stained by tears, mine and his. I touched the child's handwriting, remembered the soft breathing beside me as I watched him sleep. I also found invoices from the hospital when he had pneumonia, the visit fees, the prescriptions, how I scraped together rent and groceries to pay them. I found tuition bills, the prom dress I paid for, small debts I paid off so his credit would stay clean. I kept a note Damon once wrote, borrowing money from me, promising he would repay when he got his first job. Then I gathered bank statements, small deposits of mine, years ago, stocks I had bought for the foundation I was starting quietly. I had the patience, the hidden investments. I had papers, dates, signatures. I had photographs of Damon laughing in the yard, in old cloth clothes, feet muddy, holding hands with me while we baked flour dust on the kitchen floor. I had Polaroids and faded prints I hid behind bookshelves so Miranda wouldn't toss them in her minimalist clean walls. Margot helped me notarize the new will. She drew up the condition clearly. Damon must appear before the media or in a televised interview or on audio recording and speak the words, "Yes, she was my mother. Yes, I am sorry," public and undeniable. If he fails, all real property, bank accounts, stocks will be transferred to the Marjorie Hale Foundation. The foundation's purpose: scholarships for students from small rural homes where mothers worked in fields, kitchens, factories, unseen, unsung. We met with the notary, signed, sealed. I had 2 copies stored, one in Margot's safe deposit box, one in a lawyer's archive in Helena. I told Camelia, my granddaughter, some of it, that she might need to help me one day, but only if the truth demanded it. Camelia's eyes were wide. Sometimes at night, I lie awake, hearing Damon's voice in my mind, his sharp tone, his insults, but also the echoes of those letters, the photographs, the love I poured into unremarked mornings. I feel sorrow, yes, but also a strange peace. For the first time, I am not waiting for Damon's approval. I am waiting for the justice I built on law, evidence, and my own worth. After the ceremony, the hall emptied, families hugging, photographers calling out names. But I stayed seated for a moment longer, still clutching the wildflowers in my lap, my heart pounding. Then my phone buzzed. It was Eli, one of Damon's old friends from high school. His voice cracked. "Marjorie, did you really steal his tuition money to help someone else?" I closed my eyes. I could almost hear Damon's mocking smile across the mile. "Yes," I said, "I did not steal, Eli. I used what you all thought was lost or wasted, invested in a foundation, saved that money quietly. I kept every record." Eli asked for proof. I sent him photographs of bank deposits, papers showing the check I wrote to the small clinic where Mrs. Alvarez treated leukemia patients, invoices from the pharmacy, tuition bills with my name on them, receipt after receipt. He stared, disbelieving. Within hours, Eli posted, "She gave life, he gave shame." The words caught like wildfire. Comments flooded in. Some said Damon was cruel. Others said, maybe there is truth in what she did. Then Mrs. Alvarez, frail but brave, issued a statement. "Marjorie Hale paid for my treatments when I had no insurance. I do not know Damon well, but the help Marjorie gave saved my life." That statement was shared, liked, reposted. People began unearthing old Facebook photos of me at the clinic, at soup kitchens, quietly delivering meals to migrant families, helping children learn to read at the library. Strangers messaged, "Your work matters." Some said, "He is rich now, but he has forgotten what real care means." But there was backlash too, whispers that I used charity to mask neglect of Damon, that I distracted people from the fact I was mother but not mom. Damon's supporters called me a toxic enabler for not giving him everything he wanted. People said I made his childhood poor, and remembered him in photos, not in proud words. I saw screenshots of comments. "Stop being dramatic. She probably just wants attention now. If she loved him so much, why did she let him suffer in silence?" The bite in those words stung, but I expected it. Love often demands silence. Meanwhile, a local blog shared an excerpt from a letter Damon wrote when he was 14. "Mom, I hate that we have to ride the old truck to school when others have SUVs." The blog contrasted it with my receipt for a prom dress, bought secondhand but beautiful. It reminded people that I had always struggled to give what I could. Eli interviewed Mrs. Alvarez on camera. "Marjorie, how did you manage to keep financial records? Did Damon ever question you?" The old clinic records were shown, stamped and dated. I watched the video on my phone with trembling hands, but with a steady heart. I did not respond publicly immediately. I sat with Camelia that evening, showing her the documents, the letters, the foundation paperwork. I held her small hand. She looked up. "Grandma, they are seeing you now." Her voice cracked. She believed. By nightfall, news outlets had picked up the story. Mother of Shame, or Queen of Truth, the rise of Marjorie Hale's hidden charity. Damon tried to reply in a video, his voice defensive, eyes cloudy. But people compared his words with his old texts, demanding proof. Many said his apology sounded scripted. Morally, the tide was turning. The people who had sat in silence were now speaking. The mothers of the community sent food to our house. The school librarian handed me a stack of thank you cards from children. Ellie's blog post had more shares than Damon's graduation speech video. Something shifted in me, too. The shame I carried like a heavy coat began to lighten. I realized that exposure, uncomfortable though it was a tool, a turning point. Damon's attempt to humiliate me had opened a floodgate. That night, alone on the porch, I watched the moonlight glint off the windows of Damon's house across the road. I thought of every bean I cooked, every blanket I knitted, every hour's work I did so he could sleep warm and fed, and I understood that those acts mattered, even if he never saw them as love. Because even after he called me never a real mother, there was something real I'd built. Proof, justice, kindness, and now many were bearing witness. The morning the summons arrived from the courthouse, I felt a tremor in my chest, but it was not fear. It was inevitable. Damon's lawyers demanded proof I was mentally fit. They alleged stress, emotional instability, suggested that my decision to amend the will was impulsive, unhinged. They claimed public pressure forced me, that I was not clear-headed. I dusted off my journals, my letters, the bank statements, the typed copies of the will. I met with Margot again. She said, They will try to paint you as fragile. We must show every document, every witness. When the courtroom door opened, I walked in wearing the old blue dress once more, clasped hands wrapped around my purse. The judge's bench loomed, attorneys in dark suits filed in. Damon sat with his counsel, face composed but eyes cold. I took a seat beside Margot, who placed a stack of exhibits on the table. My medical records, bank statements, tuition receipts, charity invoices. The letter Damon wrote as a boy saying, "Mom, thanks for staying up with me." Damon's lawyer rose first. He spoke slowly, deliberately. "Your Honor, we contend Marjorie Hale's recent actions, filing this petition, publicizing hurt, threatening disinheritance, are signs of emotional disturbance. We ask the court to order a psychological evaluation to determine her capacity to execute this new will and to sever legal parental status." He paused, letting the claim float in the air like a challenge. My heart clenched, but the next moment, Eli, the old friend, stood and gave his affidavit. He had seen me managing the foundation, caring for sick neighbors, teaching Camellia to read, handling finances, doing every task with steady hand, clear mind. Then Mrs. Alvarez, the woman I treated, testified that I set her treatment invoices, showed proof of payments. The local doctor who treated Damon's pneumonia, who saw me carry him through snow, confirmed I was lucid and aware in every act. Then came the unthinkable. The court clerk played a video clip submitted as evidence. Damon speaking, a younger Damon, older now, cold, delivered. She should have just died quietly. I hated having to carry her voice in every graduation speech. I wanted someone real, not someone acting like she cares. The courtroom grew still. Gasps. My throat burned. Damon's face paled. Then Camellia, my granddaughter, was called to the stand. Small in size, fierce in truth. She held a Polaroid photo, the one of Damon and me baking flour in the kitchen, his face lit with joy. Her voice trembled but was steady. She gave me more love in a week than he gave her in a lifetime. She looked him in the eyes. The judge's pen hovered. Damon's attorney tried again. "This child is being manipulated by Mrs. Hale to gain sympathy, to sway opinion." The judge leaned forward. The echoes of the letters, the receipts, Elia's statements, Mrs. Alvarez, Camellia, formed a web of truth too tight to unravel. Margot stood and presented the will, notarized, with the condition clearly spelled. Damon must publicly acknowledge Marjorie Hale as his legal mother, if not, inheritance rights transferred to the foundation. She pointed to the sealed copy in the Helena archive, to the duplicated copy in Margot's safe deposit box. She showed the charity's growth, the stocks, the bank accounts, the strength of my legal case. The defense floundered. Damon attempted to argue that I neglected giving him prestige, expensive trips, designer clothes, but he had no receipts for the prom dress others gave him, no proof the clothes were mine to buy. He could not deny the invoices for the hospital bills, for the tuition I paid. He could not dispute Camelia's policies of love over display. Finally, the judge cleared her throat. The gavel was put to rest, momentarily. Damon Hale reviewing all testimony, documents, video evidence, and considering the fitness of Mrs. Hale, this court finds Marjorie Hale of sound mind. The petition to sever legal motherhood is granted. The amended will is valid and enforceable. Damon Hale forfeits all inheritance rights under the conditions set. All properties, investments, and accounts shall transfer to the Marjorie Hale Mothers Foundation. Silence pressed against the walls. Damon's jaw dropped. His eyes glistened, not triumphantly, but in shock. I exhaled slowly, though my mouth was dry. Camellia hugged my knee. Eli nodded from the gallery, Mrs. Alvarez's visitations from the crowd. Some reached toward me in tears. Damon rose, voice shaking. "Your Honor, But no sound came out. The court attendant ushered in the bailiff, and Damon sat back down, head bowed. I stood then, modestly, tears forming, but I held them at bay. I turned to the judge, voice a little louder than a whisper. "Thank you, Your Honor." They called for Damon to give public acknowledgement. The condition required was not physical property, it was truth. In a recorded statement later that evening, Damon said, "I was wrong. Thank you, Mother, for everything. I accept you as my mother, legally and in truth." It was not enough for some. Some said it was coerced. Some said it was timing. But many cried. Many said, "Finally." I listened as news outlets replayed the verdict. They quoted Camellia. She gave more love in a week. They quoted my letters. They showed the prom dress invoice, the hospital records. The foundation began to receive notices of support, small donations from people who said they saw themselves in my story. In that courtroom, I felt something heavy lift. The shame, the doubt, the years of pretending the insults did not hurt. Damon's verdict changed nothing of what I had done or who I was, but legally, I was free, and in the eyes of law, I was seen. Camellia squeezed my hand. I looked around the courtroom, neither hostile nor warm, just filled with witnesses to truth. The judge dismissed us. Damon left first, lawyers behind him, silent. I walked out into the sun, shoulders squared, heart full, because I was no longer the mother who was never real in the law. I was Marjorie Hale, the woman who proved love, sacrifice, and proof can silence cruelty. I woke to the inbox full of notifications. The verdict had been delivered, and already Damon had lost legal claim to every account, every stock, every parcel of land I once believed he would guard with pride. Those assets were now the property of the Marjorie Hale Mothers Foundation. My bank statements, investment portfolios, deeds, all transferred under legal seal. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at confirmation letters, some signed, stamped, delivered. Damon's world shifted while I sat quiet, but my heart quietly soared. That afternoon, a video surfaced online. Damon, sitting in the dim light of his study, visibly shaken. I was wrong. She was more of a mother than I ever deserved, he said, voice raw. The words echoed. Some cheered, others cried, but behind that apology lay years of hate, insults, rejection. Almost immediately, someone dug up old messages, screenshots of Damon calling me charity clown, backyard peasant, telling friends how I embarrassed him with old blankets and homemade dinners. He had sent some of those messages himself, between laughs with his peers. They were saved, screenshot by screenshot. People shared them. The contrast between his public apology and his private cruelty stung many in the audience. Then, the consequences rippled. Damon's business partners quietly withdrew investments. Contracts got canceled. His brand endorsements faded. His name attached no longer guaranteed status. The local high school removed his name from the list of distinguished alumni. A plaque in the auditorium, once bearing Damon Hale, Alumnus Excellence, was quietly uninstalled at night, replaced with a blank space. Meanwhile, the foundation began its work. Scholarships for rural students from Montana, grants to clinics in small towns, reading programs in dusty libraries. The first recipients of Hale's Hope scholarships wrote letters, "Because of you, I will go to college. You believed when no one else did." Those letters came from children whose mothers had worked fields, kitchens, factories, women who gave love quietly, without applause. Some online commentators tried to defend Damon, saying his apology was forced, his heart corrupted by pride. They posted side-by-side videos, one of him mocking his childhood, one of him now sounding small, remorseful. But many, many more saw the justice. They saw what true motherhood meant, what sacrifice meant, what proof meant. One evening, Heidi Clarkson, a teacher who had been at Damon's graduation, sent me a message. "Watching you at court, seeing your strength, I thought of what you taught your children: empathy, service, courage." I looked at the message and thought, this is what mattered. I may have lost a son's admiration, but I had gained respect, real respect, from those who know what love costs. Damon tried to host an interview, dressing up his apology with a rehearsed speech, but the anchors pressed. "Do you remember calling her peasant? Did you ever hug her? Why did the prom dress, the hospital bills, come from her account?" His voice cracked when asked about the old blankets. He offered no explanation more powerful than, "I was ashamed." In the public eye, he was unraveling. The million-dollar contracts began to vanish. Businesses that once flaunted his name distanced themselves. Social media influencers who had promoted his lifestyle now posted about support for Agatha. Memes circulated. Motherhood isn't defined by titles, but by bones broken and hands held. Camellia and I stood in the lobby of a community center where the foundation was hosting its first scholarship ceremony. I watched mothers from small towns, fathers, students whose eyes lit up when they heard their names called. I saw banners, Hale's hope, because love should not be judged by appearances. That night, I opened an envelope from one of Damon's former sponsors. Due to recent revelations and public outcry, we must end our relationship with Damon Hale. We believe true character matters more than image. Another company pulled their ad. Another client wrote to me, "If your foundation is named for you, then you are mother to so many more than he ever could be." I cried once, quietly, under the porch light, holding Camelia's hand. Not out of vengeance, but out of strange relief. The shame, the insults, the nights I wondered if I had been enough, they began to loosen their grip. I felt something lift. Damon's name was now uttered in hushed tones at family gatherings. Miranda, if she spoke at all, used limp apologies. But the world had seen what I did, had heard what he said, had weighed the receipts, the love, the testimony. The legal papers had done their work. The moral judgment followed. Camelia looked up at me that night and whispered, "They see you now, Grandma." I nodded. I did not need more than that, because in losing Damon's inheritance, he lost the right to redefine who I am, and in gaining the foundation, I had secured not just what I owned, but what I lived for. I slept that night with something rare, a quiet confidence. Damon's collapse was not a victory for me. It was a revelation, and revelation, once seen, cannot be unseen. They asked me to speak at White Pines High School this spring, in their auditorium packed with students, teachers, parents. The banner overhead read, "Women Who Rise Above." I stood behind the podium in my old blue dress, bouquet at my side, heart rambling in my chest. The stage lights warmed my face. I saw Camelia, sitting near the front row, holding a notebook, ready to sketch or scribble, but watching. I cleared my throat. I told them of the days I baked and sewed, of cold nights leaning over his hospital bed, holding him until he slept, of every dollar saved. I told them the love I gave was loud in unnoticed hours. My voice trembling, I said, "You asked if I regret raising him. No, I regret staying silent too long." The silence was heavy, then gentle applause. A girl stood, young, nervous, hands twisting. She rose and asked, "My mom left. You reminded me that love doesn't need blood." Her voice hit me in the chest. Some students gasped, some nodded, others are quiet. I smiled through tears. I said, "Thank you, you're more real than you know." Reporters had filled the back rows. The next morning, headlines exploded. The woman he said was never his real mother became the real mother of many. Op-eds discussed what true motherhood means, biology versus sacrifice. Social media posts shared that phrase again and again. They quoted the girl, quoted my words. One journalist from the local paper asked me, "With all you've done, do you ever wish Damon had seen you differently?" I paused. The lights, the microphones, the faces hoping for more. I said, "I wish he had, yes. But more than that, I wish I had stood up sooner." If silence made him stronger in his arrogance, then my voice would have been the first crack in his armor. I regret staying silent too long. Another reporter asked, "Do you forgive him?" I nodded, though in my heart forgiveness is always a complicated shelve. I said, "I forgive myself." But forgiveness does not erase accountability. A hush. Camelia squeezed my hand. Students lined up afterward to shake my hand. One boy said, "You inspired me to call my mom." Another student brought a sketch of me holding flowers. Teachers said they had never seen a graduation speech story end like this. I thought of Damon. Would he ever see it? Would he ever have to face what he denied? A television clip showed me standing in that school gym, students behind me. The headline, "Marjorie Hale, not by blood, but by love." The tagline under the video read, "She was never real mother to him, she became real to many." That night I lay in bed, Camelia asleep beside me, her little breathing slow and sure. I thought of all the mornings I left the house, smelling of flower and hope. I thought of every moment I doubted whether it mattered. And when I closed my eyes, I believed. Yes, it mattered. I mattered. Because they now call me mother, not because of blood, but because of truth. And in truth, I have never felt more real. The spring sun glinted across the ribbon strung between two young oak trees in front of the newly built Marjorie Hale Mothers Foundation Library. Its doors were painted a soft cream, windows wide, welcoming. Children gathered in the courtyard, teachers in neat dresses, community members in warm coats. I stood beside Camellia, her hand small and strong in mine, heart full and trembling. Camellia led me forward onto the stage in front of the entrance. Behind us, workers were setting up chairs, stacks of books lining shelves seen through the glass, banners reading, "Stories that nourish souls." Someone placed a small Polaroid photo in a wooden frame on an easel stage right, the image of Damon as a boy, wrapped in my arms, flour on our hands from baking, his cheek pressed to mine. I reached forward and smoothed the wood. The photograph still fading at the edges, but alive with memory. A large screen off to stage left flickered. Damon's graduation speech, that moment of cruelty, played in low volume. His voice sharp. "You were never a real mother. She spent my college money on strangers." But no one turned toward the screen. No one listened. They had turned their backs, not out of disrespect to the past, but because they had already witnessed truth. Instead, faces glowed toward me and Camellia. Applause rose. I raised the microphone. My voice caught for a moment, but I pulled it steady. "He said I was not real," I said, looking down at Camellia, then out at the crowd. "But I became real. By law, by proof, by love." The words weighed heavy and light at once. Camelia's hand squeezed mine. I felt her breath, even in this moment, and I thought of all the nights I lay awake wondering if anything I did mattered. Now I saw with my own eyes. Hearts had been changed. The applause suited itself round the courtyard, louder than any criticism, more healing than any insult. Children giggled in the background. Librarians carried open books in, sprinkling color and promise. Volunteers handed out bookmarks that read, "Love is Real, Marjorie Hale Mothers Foundation." A reporter stepped forward, camera rolling, flashbulbs bursting. "Hey, Elle, what do you want people to remember most about this place?" I paused. I could smell the fresh paint, heard the rustle of pages, saw Camelia's face. "I want them to remember that motherhood is not only what you are given by birth," I said. "It is what is shown by sacrifice, by standing up, by truth." I smiled, though tears threatened at my lids. News videos this evening showed scenes from the ceremony. Children laughing, Camellia holding flowers, the framed Polaroid, the foundation patrons hugging under the dusk sky. The headline read, "She said I was never his mother. She proved she was mother to many." I stepped off the stage later, Camellia in one arm, the small photo in the other. We walked down a path lined with oak saplings, each planted by students who benefited from the foundation scholarships. I thought of the seeds my work planted: kindness, courage, proof. Under the soft light of a lantern overhead, I knelt beside a sapling, touched its young trunk, offered a silent thanks for every night of worry, every penny saved, every insult borne. Camellia stood beside me and whispered, "Grandma, you are more than real to me." I felt every stitch of love I worked into her heart. As darkness settled, lanterns glowed like stars along the walkway, voices drifting in quiet conversation, laughter of children playing beyond the library walls, pages turning. I looked toward the screen that still flickered outside the doors with Damon's old speech, but the words were dim now, their echo faded by this moment's light. I spoke once more, quietly so only Camellia could hear. "He said I was not real, but by law, I am real. By proof, I am real. By love, I have always been real." She squeezed me, smiled. And in that smile, I saw the beginning of healing, not just for me, but for all who believed me when I was unseen. Tonight, I will sleep without a doubt, because the library stands, the foundation works, children read, mothers feel seen. My name is spoken, not in mockery, but in honor. I am Marjorie Hale, once dismissed, now remembered, by law, by proof, by love. And that was my story. Maybe you've met someone like me, someone quiet, dismissed, called less than real. But let me remind you, love does not need permission to be true. It only needs courage to remain. If you believe that dignity matters, that kindness must never be forgotten, then this story was for you. And if Marjorie Hale's voice moved something in your heart, please smash that hype button. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories, so these voices never fade. We tell the stories the world tried to silence. Your support helps us remind the world we were always here, and we were always real. Until next time, stay kind, stay strong, and never forget the quiet ones. They carry the loudest truths.